The metal chair felt cold against Zexai's damaged scales. His claws scraped against the smooth table as he tried to find a comfortable position. The bright lights above made his yellow eyes water. He had been sitting in this small room for 3 hours now, waiting for the questions to begin. Across from him sat Velnara, a tall being with pale blue skin that seemed to glow softly in the harsh light. Her kind were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful creatures who never raised their voices, let alone their hands. She looked at the thick file in front of her, then at the scarred reptilian sitting across the table. "Commander Zexai," she said in her musical voice. "You were there when it happened. You saw what the humans did to your fleet, to your world. The Council needs to understand how this was possible." Zexai's forked tongue flicked out nervously. The burns on his neck still ached when he moved too quickly. "You want to know about the humans, about what they are really like?" "Yes. Our records show that Earth was a primitive world. They had basic space travel, simple weapons. Your empire had conquered 40 star systems. How did they defeat you so completely?" The Saurian commander laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. It was more like the hiss of steam escaping from a broken pipe. "Primitive. That is what we thought too. We looked at their ships and saw metal boxes held together with bolts. We looked at their weapons and saw crude projectile throwers. We thought we were hunting children." Velnara made notes on her electronic pad. "Tell me about the first contact. What happened when your fleet reached Earth?" Zexai closed his eyes and the memories came flooding back. Admiral Krextar commanded the invasion force, 300 ships, the pride of the Saurian Navy. We dropped out of hyperspace expecting to see a world of frightened primitives begging for mercy. He paused, his breathing becoming heavier. Instead, we found them waiting for us. Every human ship in their system was already moving toward us, not away from us, toward us. That seems unusual. Most species attempt to flee when faced with superior firepower. That should have been our first warning. Zexai's claws dug deeper into the table. Their leader, some human called Admiral Stevens, broadcast a message to our entire fleet. He said, "Welcome to Earth, you picked the wrong planet to invade." Then he laughed. Velnara looked up from her notes. He laughed? Like he was enjoying himself. Like this was some kind of game to him. Zexai shook his head. "Admiral Krextar ordered the attack immediately. We had energy shields, plasma cannons, ships 3 times the size of theirs. It should have been over in minutes." The room fell quiet except for the soft humming of the air recyclers. Velnara waited patiently for him to continue. "The first human ship to reach our lines was a small destroyer. Captain Jake Morrison was its commander. Our sensors showed it had taken critical damage from our opening barrage. Any sane being would have retreated for repairs. Instead, Morrison accelerated directly toward our flagship." Zexai's voice grew quieter. He was broadcasting something over all frequencies. Music. They call it music, but it sounded like organized noise to us. Something about thunder and lightning and fighting. His crew was singing along. Singing while under attack? While their ship was burning around them. Morrison's destroyer rammed straight into the side of our command cruiser. Both ships exploded. Just like that, we lost our second in command, and they lost a destroyer. But Morrison was still broadcasting even as his ship broke apart. He was laughing and shouting something about taking them with him. Velnara set down her electronic pad. "This seems like desperate tactics, not effective warfare." "That is what we thought. Admiral Krextar called it the desperate act of a dying species. He ordered the fleet to advance and finish them quickly." Zexai's eyes grew distant. "We had no idea what we were really facing." "What do you mean?" "The humans have something they call tactics. They study war like we study mathematics. Every move they made was planned. Morrison's sacrifice was not desperation. It was strategy." Zexai stood up and began pacing the small room, his tail swishing behind him. While we were focused on the big explosion, smaller human ships slipped past our outer defenses. They attacked our supply vessels, our repair stations, our communication arrays. In 10 minutes, they had crippled our ability to coordinate the fleet. But you still had superior Numbers and firepower. Numbers mean nothing if you cannot use them properly. The humans divided our fleet into small groups, then attacked each group with overwhelming local force. They would hit us hard, retreat before we could respond, then hit us again somewhere else. Velnara frowned. This sounds like advanced military doctrine. Our intelligence suggested they were a young species with limited combat experience. Zexhai stopped pacing and stared at her. Limited combat experience? These humans have been fighting wars for their entire history. They have been killing each other with increasing efficiency for thousands of years. When we arrived, we did not interrupt their development. We gave them a new target to practice on. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Velnara pulled her robes closer around her thin frame. Captain Lisa Martinez commanded one of their battle groups. Zexhai continued. She used something they called Wolfpack tactics. Her ships would appear from nowhere, destroy one of our vessels, then vanish again. We never knew where the next attack would come from. How is this possible with their primitive technology? Because they are not primitive. They are efficient. Every system on their ship serves a purpose. No wasted space, no unnecessary decoration, just pure function. Their weapons may look simple, but they work perfectly every time. Zexhai sat back down, his large frame making the chair creak. During the battle, we intercepted some of their communications. Captain Martinez was talking to her crew about something called the Battle of the Atlantic. She said her grandfather had hunted submarines the same way they were hunting us. Submarines? Underwater vessels used in their ancient wars. The point is, these humans learn from their history. Every battle they have ever fought, every mistake they have ever made, every victory they have ever won, they remember it all. They teach it to their children. Velnara realized she was trembling slightly. What happened next? We began to take heavy losses. Admiral Krextar ordered a full assault on their home planet. If we could not defeat their fleet, we would attack their civilians and force a surrender. Zexhai's voice became very quiet. That was our second mistake. What was the first? Coming to their system at all. He looked directly at Velnara. But attacking their planet. That was when we learned what humans really are when you threaten their families. The interrogator could see the fear in the alien's eyes, a terror that went deeper than physical pain. Whatever the humans had done next had broken something inside this hardened military commander. The orbital bombardment began at dawn on their largest continent, Zexhai whispered. We thought we were ending the war. Instead, we were just making them angry. Velnara watched as Zexhai's claws left deep scratches in the metal table. The alien's breathing had become rapid and shallow. Whatever memories he was reliving clearly caused him great distress. You said the bombardment made them angry, she prompted gently. What happened after you attacked their planet? Zexhai was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. We thought we understood anger. Saurians feel rage when cornered. We fight harder when wounded. But human anger is different. It is cold and calculating and patient. I do not understand the difference. When a Saurian is angry, he strikes immediately, without thought. When a human is angry, he makes plans. Zexhai looked up at the ceiling. The orbital bombardment lasted 6 hours. We destroyed 3 of their major cities. Millions of humans died. We expected them to surrender within days. Velnara made notes on her pad. But they did not surrender. No. They went quiet. All radio chatter stopped. Their ships retreated to the outer system. For 3 days we heard nothing from the human government. Admiral Krextar thought we had broken their will to fight. What were they actually doing during those 3 days? Zexhai's laugh was bitter. Planning, learning, adapting. They took our attack patterns from the first battle and studied them. They analyzed every weapon we used, every tactic we employed. They figured out how we thought, how we made decisions. He shifted in his chair, wincing as the movement pulled at his old injuries. On the 4th day, they struck back. But not the way we expected. They did not attack our main fleet. Instead, they hit our supply lines. Supply lines? Food, fuel, ammunition, repair parts, everything an army needs to function. The humans somehow found every supply convoy, every depot, every refueling station. Captain Pete Sullivan led the attacks. He was an old human, maybe 60 years by their count. He moved like a ghost. Velnara frowned. How could one old human cause such damage? Because he was not just one human. He commanded thousands of small ships, each one crewed by humans who knew exactly what they were doing. Sullivan had studied something called guerrilla warfare. He told our captured officers that his species had been fighting this way for centuries. HFY stood up and began pacing again. Sullivan's ships would appear from behind asteroids, attack our convoys, then vanish before we could respond. They knew exactly where to hit us to cause maximum damage. They targeted our food supplies first. Why food? Because hungry soldiers make mistakes. Sullivan understood that war is not just about weapons and ships. It is about breaking the enemy's will to fight. His attacks were designed to make us afraid, to make us doubt our commanders, to make us want to go home. The room fell silent except for the sound of HFY's claws clicking against the floor as he paced. The real horror began when we tried to land troops on their planet, he continued. We sent down 50,000 soldiers to secure their major cities. They were the best warriors in the Saurian military, equipped with the finest weapons and armor. What happened to them? They disappeared, not all at once, but slowly. Every day, fewer soldiers reported for duty. Patrols would go out and never return. Guards would be found dead at their posts with no sign of who killed them. Velnara set down her pad. The humans were hunting your soldiers? Like we were prey, animals. They had turned their own cities into traps. Every building, every street, every sewer tunnel was a potential ambush site. Colonel Lisa Martinez led the defense of their capital city. She had studied human battles from something called World War II. What is World War II? HFY stopped pacing and stared at her. The most destructive war in human history. 60 million humans died in 6 years. They fought with such intensity that they nearly destroyed their own civilization. Martinez had studied every battle from that war. She knew exactly how to fight an occupying army. How? She made every human civilian into a soldier. Children, as young as 10, were carrying messages between resistance cells. Old humans who could barely walk were building bombs in their basements. Every human we trusted was potentially an enemy. HFY returned to his chair, his movements showing his exhaustion. The humans used tactics we had never seen before. They would pretend to surrender, then attack when our guards were down. They would dress as civilians, then pull weapons when our patrols passed by. They poisoned our food, sabotaged our equipment, and spread false information to confuse our officers. This seems dishonorable. Honor is a luxury for those who are winning. The humans were fighting for their survival, and they used every advantage they could find. They did not care about honor or fair play. They cared about victory. Velnara felt a chill run down her spine. What was the worst thing they did? HFY was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was filled with pain. They learned to think like us. Captain Tony Rodriguez captured one of our communications specialists and forced him to reveal our command codes. Then Rodriguez used those codes to send false orders to our troops. False orders? He sent entire battalions into ambushes. He ordered supply convoys to drive straight into human attack zones. He convinced our officers that retreat orders were actually advance orders. In one day, Rodriguez's false commands killed more Saurian soldiers than a week of direct combat. How is this possible? Because Rodriguez had studied human military history. He knew about something called Operation Mincemeat, where humans in World War II used false documents to deceive their enemies. He adapted that tactic for our technology. HFY's voice grew stronger as he continued. The humans did not just fight us. They studied us like we were laboratory animals. Dr. Amy Jackson led a team of human scientists who analyzed every aspect of Saurian biology and psychology. They learned our weaknesses, our fears, our blind spots. What did they do with this knowledge? They weaponized it. Jackson's team developed sound frequencies that caused pain to Saurian hearing. They created lights that disrupted our vision. They even developed psychological warfare techniques specifically designed to break Saurian morale. Velnara realized she was holding her breath. Psychological warfare? They would broadcast recordings of Saurian death screams over our communication networks. They would leave the bodies of our soldiers arranged in patterns that had religious significance to our people. They made us afraid of the dark, afraid of silence, afraid of our own shadows. This seems incredibly cruel. Zexhai nodded slowly. That was when we realized the truth about humans. They are not just warriors, they are artists of war. They have spent thousands of years perfecting the craft of violence. Every technique they used against us, they had first used against each other. The interrogation room felt colder now. Velnara pulled her robes tighter and tried to process what she was hearing. The siege lasted 6 months, Zexhai continued. Every day we lost more soldiers. Every night we heard the sounds of humans moving through the ruins of their cities. They were like ghosts, striking without warning and vanishing before we could respond. How did it end? With the humans teaching us the most terrifying lesson of all. They showed us that they had been holding back. Velnara leaned forward in her chair. The phrase holding back sent a wave of dread through her slim frame. If what the humans had already done was them showing restraint, what were they truly capable of? What do you mean they were holding back? She asked. Zexhai's yellow eyes met hers across the table. During the siege, we captured a human soldier named Danny Wright. He was badly wounded but still fighting when we found him. Our interrogators tried to break him for information. Did they succeed? Wright laughed at them. He said our torture methods were amateur compared to what humans had done to each other throughout history. He started telling our interrogators about human conflicts, describing techniques that made our methods look like children's games. Zexhai's claws scraped against the table surface. Wright explained that everything we had experienced so far was what humans called conventional warfare. He said his people had weapons and tactics that they chose not to use because they wanted us to survive long enough to learn. Learn what? Why we should never threaten Earth again. Zexhai stood up and walked to the small window that looked out into space. 3 weeks into the siege, the humans demonstrated what they meant. Velnara waited as the alien commander gathered his thoughts. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Dr. Helen Torres contacted our command ship directly, Zexhai continued. She was a human scientist, small and quiet-looking. She seemed harmless. She requested a meeting with Admiral Krextar under a flag of truce. What did she want? To show us something. Torres arrived in a small shuttle with no weapons, no guards, just a briefcase full of data tablets. She sat down with the Admiral and began explaining human scientific capabilities. Zexhai turned away from the window. Torres had been studying captured Saurian soldiers, not interrogating them but examining them. She had mapped our entire genetic structure, analyzed our immune systems, identified our biological weaknesses. For what purpose? She had designed biological weapons specifically tailored to kill Saurians, viruses that would attack our nervous systems, bacteria that would dissolve our scales, chemical compounds that would shut down our organs one by one. Velnara felt her breathing become shallow. She threatened to use these weapons? No. That was the terrifying part. Torres explained exactly how the weapons worked, showed detailed plans for their deployment, demonstrated their effectiveness on tissue samples. Then she told Admiral Krextar that humans had chosen not to use them. Why not? Zexhai returned to his chair. Because humans understand something that most species do not. True power lies not in using your strongest weapons, but in choosing not to use them. Torres wanted us to know that humanity could have ended the war in days, but they decided to fight us conventionally instead. This seems illogical. Only to species that have never mastered restraint. Torres explained that humans had developed these biological weapons during their own wars, then banned their use against each other. They called it the Geneva Convention, rules for how to fight wars without becoming monsters. Velnara made notes, her hands trembling slightly. What happened after this meeting? Admiral Krextar was shaken. He had expected threats and demands. Instead, he received a lesson in human philosophy. Torres gave him historical records of human conflicts, showing how they had developed increasingly deadly weapons, then chosen to limit their use. Did this change the Admiral's strategy? He became desperate. The idea that humans were fighting with deliberate restraint terrified him more than their weapons did. He ordered the nuclear bombardment of Earth's largest continent. Velnara gasped. Nuclear weapons against a populated area? 50 thermonuclear warheads targeted at their major population centers. It was meant to be the final blow that would force human surrender. Zexhi's voice became very quiet. Instead, it was the moment that humans stopped being gentle with us. The room felt colder. Velnara realized she was holding her breath. The bombardment killed 20 million humans in the first hour, Zexhi continued. Entire cities vanished. In nuclear fire, the radiation poisoned vast areas of their planet. It was the worst attack in the history of their species. How did they respond? Silence. For 12 hours, there was no communication from Earth, no distress signals, no surrender, offers, no pleas for mercy, just complete silence. Admiral Krextar thought we had finally broken them. Zexhi began pacing again, his movements agitated. Then General Chris Anderson broadcast a message to our entire fleet. He spoke very calmly, very quietly. He said that humans had tried to fight this war with honor, but we had chosen to target their civilians. What did this mean? It meant the rules had changed. Anderson explained that humans had spent centuries developing codes of conduct for warfare. They had agreed among themselves about what targets were acceptable and what methods were forbidden. But we had broken those rules. So they abandoned their restrictions? Completely. Anderson's message ended with 6 words that still give me nightmares. Now you get to see why. Velnara set down her electronic pad. Her hands were shaking too much to continue writing. The counterattack began within hours, Zexhi continued. But these were not the same humans we had been fighting. These humans used weapons and tactics they had kept hidden throughout the entire war. What kind of weapons? Captain Katie Walsh led a boarding party that attacked our flagship. Her soldiers moved through our ship like death itself. They had studied Saurian anatomy and knew exactly where to strike for maximum damage. They used weapons that seemed designed specifically to cause terror. Describe these weapons. Projectile. Weapons that fired explosive rounds designed to wound rather than kill immediately. Energy weapons calibrated to cause maximum pain while keeping the victim conscious. Psychological warfare devices that broadcast sounds engineered to drive Saurians insane. Zexhi sat down heavily. But the worst part was their faces. During the siege, human soldiers had shown emotion, anger, fear, determination. But these new humans showed nothing. They killed with the same expression they might use to perform routine maintenance. They had become emotionless? No, they had become professional. Walsh explained it to captured Saurian officers. She said that everything they had done before was warfare with emotion. What they were doing now was warfare as a science. I do not understand the difference. Emotional warfare is personal. You fight because you are angry or afraid or defending something you love. Scientific warfare is different. You fight because it is the most efficient way to achieve your objective. Velnara felt sick. What was their objective? Complete victory with minimum human casualties. They had calculated exactly how much force was needed to break Saurian resistance. They applied that force with mechanical precision. How long did this phase of the war last? 6 days. In 6 days, these emotionless human soldiers dismantled our entire invasion force. They captured our ships intact, took our officers prisoner, and destroyed our ability to fight back, all while suffering minimal losses themselves. Zexhi looked directly at Velnara. The most terrifying moment came when Sergeant Tony Rodriguez captured me. I was wounded and helpless. I expected him to kill me immediately. Instead, he gave me medical treatment and asked if I wanted to call my family. He showed mercy. He showed calculation. Rodriguez explained that letting me live served human strategic interests better than killing me would. He said I would be more valuable as a witness than as a casualty. The interrogation room fell silent. Velnara struggled to process what she was hearing. That was when I understood the true horror of humanity, Zexhi whispered. They are not Monsters. Monsters kill from instinct or madness. Humans kill from choice with full understanding of what they are doing. And when they choose not to kill, that is even more frightening. Velnara stared at Zexhai for a long moment. The alien's words hung in the air between them like poison gas. She had spent her entire life believing that intelligence and civilization naturally led to peace. The idea that a species could become more dangerous through wisdom rather than less was almost impossible to accept. "What happened after your capture?" she asked quietly. Zexhai settled back in his chair, seeming suddenly very tired. "I was taken to a human medical facility. They treated my injuries with the same care they showed their own wounded soldiers. The doctors were efficient and professional. They saved my life without question. That seems contradictory to their earlier actions. That was what made it so disturbing. One day they were killing my soldiers with calculated precision. The next day they were healing my wounds with the same careful attention to detail. Both actions served their strategic purposes." Velnara picked up her electronic pad again, though her hands were still shaking. "Tell me about the end of the war." There was no final battle, no dramatic confrontation. The humans simply surrounded our remaining forces and waited. Admiral Rick Carter commanded the human fleet that blockaded Saurian Prime. He could have destroyed our homeworld in hours, but instead he sent a message to our government. What did the message say? Zexhai closed his eyes. Carter explained that humans had studied our invasion and determined its cause. We had attacked Earth because we believed humans were weak and primitive. Carter said the war would end when we understood that we had been wrong. How long did this take? 3 weeks. For 3 weeks, human ships sat in orbit around our homeworld, while Carter broadcast lessons in human history to our population. Every day our people learned more about what humans were really capable of. Velnara frowned. He was educating your entire species? He was terrifying them. Carter showed us recordings of human wars throughout history. The Battle of Stalingrad, where humans fought each other for months in the ruins of a single city. The Normandy invasion, where humans deliberately charged into certain death to establish a foothold on enemy territory. Zexhai opened his eyes and looked directly at her. But Carter also showed us human achievements, their art, their music, their literature. He wanted us to understand that the same species that created beautiful poetry also created the most efficient methods of mass destruction. What was his point? That humans contained both angels and demons, and they chose which one to be based on circumstances. Carter explained that when we invaded Earth, we had awakened the demon side of humanity. But now that the war was ending, they were choosing to be angels again. The room fell silent, except for the humming of the air recyclers. Velnara tried to imagine an entire species with such duality. The surrender negotiations were handled by General Karen Murphy, Zexhai continued. She was a small human, maybe 50 years old, with gray hair and kind eyes. She looked like she could be someone's grandmother. But she was not. She was one of the most dangerous humans alive. Murphy had planned the final assault on our homeworld. She knew exactly how to break our planetary defenses, how to capture our leadership, how to occupy our cities with minimum casualties. She could have conquered us in days. Why did she choose negotiation instead? Because Murphy understood something that most military commanders do not. Conquest creates hatred, and hatred leads to rebellion. She wanted the Saurian Empire to surrender completely, not just militarily but psychologically. Velnara made notes as Zexhai spoke. How did she accomplish this? Murphy began the negotiations by apologizing for human actions during the war, not for defending themselves but for the methods they had been forced to use. She expressed genuine regret for the Saurian lives that had been lost. This seems manipulative. It was completely sincere. That was what made it so effective. Murphy truly was sorry that the war had happened, but she was also absolutely determined that it would never happen again. Zexhai stood up and walked to the window again. Murphy presented the Saurian government with 2 choices. We could accept human terms and maintain our independence, or we could continue fighting and face complete annihilation. What were the human terms? Surprisingly simple. The Saurian Empire would withdraw from all occupied territories. We would dismantle our offensive military capabilities. We would provide reparations to the worlds we had conquered. And we would establish permanent diplomatic relations with Earth. That seems reasonable for a defeated enemy. The reasonableness was the point. Murphy wanted other species to see that humans were capable of mercy toward those who surrendered completely. But she also wanted everyone to understand what happened to those who threatened human civilians. Zexhai returned to his chair. The most important part of the negotiations was what Murphy called the education clause. Education clause? Every Saurian child would be required to study human history as part of their basic education. They would learn about human wars, human achievements, human capabilities. Murphy wanted future generations of Saurians to understand exactly what humanity was capable of. Velnara set down her pad, so that they would never consider attacking Earth again. Exactly. Murphy explained that the best way to prevent future wars was to ensure that potential enemies understood the consequences of starting them. She called it deterrence through education. How did your government respond to these terms? They accepted immediately. Our leaders had seen what humans could do when they stopped holding back. The idea of facing that level of focused violence again was unthinkable. Zexhai's voice became very quiet. But the most disturbing part came after the surrender was signed. Dr. Helen Torres returned to brief our scientists on human capabilities. What did she tell them? That everything we had experienced during the war represented less than 10% of human military potential. Torres showed our researchers weapons designs that had been developed but never used, strategic concepts that had been planned but never implemented. Why share this information? Because Torres wanted our scientists to understand what restraint meant to humans. She explained that humans had developed the ability to exterminate entire species, then chosen to develop rules for limiting their own power instead. Velnara felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of weapons? Planet killers. Weapons that could sterilize entire star systems. Technologies that could remake the basic structure of matter itself. Torres showed us plans for devices that could destabilize stars and collapse space itself. And humans chose not to build these weapons? They chose to build them, test them, then lock them away. Torres said that true security came not from being unable to destroy your enemies, but from being able to destroy them and choosing not to. The interrogation room fell completely silent. Velnara stared at her notes, trying to process the implications of what she had heard. The war ended with a ceremony on Earth, Zexhai continued. Representatives from dozens of species attended. Admiral Carter gave a speech that was broadcast throughout the galaxy. What did he say? That humanity desired peace above all else, that they had fought only when threatened, that they hoped never to fight again. But Carter also made it clear that Earth would defend itself against any threat, using whatever methods were necessary. Zexhai looked directly at Velnara. Carter's final words were a promise and a warning. He said that humans had learned to be the galaxy's most efficient killers, so that they could choose to be its most devoted peacekeepers instead. And you? Believe this? I have seen what humans do to their enemies. I have also seen what they do for their friends. Both are equally impressive and equally terrifying. Velnara closed her electronic pad. The interview was complete, but she felt more confused than when it had started. What should the Galactic Council do with this information? She asked. Zexhai smiled, and for the first time since the interview began, there was no fear in his expression. Leave the humans alone. Trade with them, learn from them, even befriend them if you can. But never ever threaten them or those they protect. Why not? Because humans have spent 10,000 years learning how to kill each other efficiently. When they turned that knowledge against us, we lasted 6 months. If they ever decide that the galaxy itself is a threat to Earth— Zexhai did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Velnara understood perfectly. The monsters were not coming. They were already here, and they had chosen to be guardian angels instead.